You used to enjoy crowds, social gatherings, large groups of people, but now, when you're around many people, something happens that you can't explain. You feel drained within minutes, your nervous system goes haywire, you become anxious, overwhelmed, desperate to escape. And it's not social anxiety, it's something deeper. Being around groups of people has become physically, emotionally, and psychologically unbearable. Carl Jung discovered that this isn't weakness, oversensitivity, or introversion. It's a specific phenomenon that happens to people who have undergone genuine spiritual awakening, and what's causing it will completely change how you understand your need for solitude. Because Jung found that awakened individuals aren't avoiding people. They're protecting themselves from something most people can't even perceive. Today I'm revealing why Jung said awakened people become unable to tolerate crowds, what they're actually sensing that makes groups unbearable, and why forcing yourself into social situations is damaging in ways you don't realize. Here's what Jung understood that changes everything. Awakened people aren't just more sensitive to social situations. They're perceiving and absorbing psychological material from everyone around them that unconscious people can't detect. Every person emits what Jung called psychic atmosphere, their emotions, their shadows, their unconscious material. And in groups, these atmospheres create a collective field that awakened individuals perceive directly. Jung called this energetic permeability. Before awakening, you had natural psychological defenses that filtered out other people's unconscious material. But awakening dissolves these boundaries. Your psyche becomes permeable. You start absorbing the emotional states, shadow material, and psychic content of everyone near you without being able to stop it. Most people in crowds experience only their own consciousness, but awakened individuals experience their state plus everyone else's simultaneously. It's like trying to listen to 50 radio stations at once. Your nervous system wasn't designed to process this level of psychic input. The first reason explains exactly what you're sensing. Jung's first insight. Awakened people can't be around crowds because they're absorbing the unconscious material, the repressed emotions, shadow content, and psychic toxicity that everyone is unconsciously projecting. And processing this amount of unconscious material from multiple sources simultaneously overwhelms your system. Think about what most people are carrying unconsciously: repressed rage, suppressed grief, denied fear, shadow material they don't even know exists. Before awakening, you couldn't sense this, but Jung discovered that awakened consciousness perceives beneath the surface automatically. One of Jung's patients described this. I walked into a party and immediately felt nauseous. I could feel the hostility beneath polite conversations. The anxiety masked by laughter, the sadness everyone was performing happiness over. I was absorbing everyone's unconscious material. Within 20 minutes, I was overwhelmed by feelings that weren't even mine. Jung explained, I'd become psychically permeable. I couldn't filter out their unconscious projections. This is what Jung meant by unconscious contagion. People are unconsciously projecting massive amounts of unprocessed material, and awakened individuals absorb this directly. You take in their unexpressed rage, their suppressed fear, their denied shadow, and your nervous system tries to process it as if it's yours. The overwhelm comes from volume. One person's unconscious material is manageable. 10 people's is overwhelming. 50 people's is unbearable. You're processing content from every person in proximity, and your system can't differentiate between what's yours and what you've absorbed. You'll recognize this if emotions that aren't yours flood your system in crowds. If you leave social events feeling like you've absorbed everyone's psychological waste, this isn't imagination. You're perceiving and processing material unconscious people don't even know they're projecting. But absorbing unconscious material is just the first layer. The second reason reveals something even more disturbing. Awakened people can't tolerate crowds because they sense what Jung called the collective shadow, the accumulated darkness and unconsciousness of the group itself. Not individual shadows, but the shadow that emerges when people gather unconsciously. And this collective shadow is toxic in ways individual shadows aren't. Jung observes something terrifying. When unconscious people gather in groups, their individual shadows merge into something darker. The mob mentality, the herd behavior, the collective unconsciousness that allows groups to do things individuals would never do alone. And awakened individuals sense this collective shadow formation immediately. One of Jung's analyzans described this. I was at a concert, thousands of people, everyone seemed happy, but I felt something dark forming. Not from any individual, but from the collective itself. A density, an unconsciousness, something oppressive and menacing. Jung called it the collective shadow. He said awakened people sense this automatically and instinctively want to escape. This is what Jung meant by the tyranny of the collective. Groups of unconscious people create a psychological field that's darker and denser than individual parts. This field has a pull. It wants to absorb individual consciousness into collective unconsciousness. And awakened individuals sense this pull as danger. The sensation manifests as creeping dread. Everything seems normal, but you feel increasingly unsafe. You sense the group consciousness trying to pull you in, dissolve your individual awareness into the mass. And every cell screams to escape. You'll notice you feel this, especially in large gatherings, concerts, rallies, crowded events where people merge into mob consciousness. The larger the unconscious group, the darker the collective shadow. And your awakened consciousness perceives this shadow as the threat it is. But sensing collective shadow is just one aspect. The third reason reveals why your energy gets drained so quickly. Here's what Jung observed. Awakened people can't be around crowds because unconscious people unconsciously draw on awakened energy to maintain their unconsciousness. You're not just absorbing their material, they're actively draining your energy to avoid facing what you've already faced. And this energetic vampirism happens automatically. Think about the work you've done to awaken, the pain you've processed, the consciousness you've developed. But unconscious people don't want to do that work. They want to stay asleep. And Jung discovered they unconsciously draw energy from awakened people to avoid awakening themselves. One of Jung's patients described this. I'd be around my family and feel my energy being pulled from me, an actual sensation of being drained. They'd leave feeling energized. I'd be exhausted. Jung explained, they were unconsciously feeding on my consciousness. My awakened state was holding space for their unconsciousness. They didn't mean to, but they were using my energy to avoid discomfort. This is what Jung called energetic compensation. Unconscious people exist in a lower energy state. Being around awakened people temporarily elevates them without them doing the work. And this elevation comes at your expense. The drain intensifies in groups. One person draining your energy is noticeable. 20 people draining at once leaves you depleted for days. You're energetically maintaining their ability to stay unconscious. You'll recognize this if people seem energized after being around you while you're completely drained. If you need days to recover from a few hours around groups. This isn't introversion. It's energetic depletion from unconsciously maintaining others' unconscious state. But energy drain is just one mechanism. The fourth reason reveals why your nervous system can't handle crowds. If you can't be around crowds anymore, if you're absorbing unconscious material, sensing collective shadow, being energetically drained, Jung would say, this isn't weakness. This is your awakened consciousness, protecting itself from psychological environments it can no longer tolerate. Before we continue, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Now, these final reasons reveal why your system actively rejects group situations. Jung's fourth insight. Awakened people can't tolerate crowds because their consciousness operates at a frequency fundamentally incompatible with collective unconsciousness. Not just different, incompatible. Like trying to play a vinyl record on a digital player, the systems don't match. Think about consciousness as vibration. Before awakening, you vibrated at the same frequency as collective consciousness. But awakening changed your frequency. You're vibrating at a rate that's higher, faster, more refined than collective unconsciousness. One of Jung's analysans described this. I felt like I was vibrating at a different speed than everyone around me. Being in crowds felt like forcing two magnets together the wrong way. Resistance, repulsion, wrongness. Jung said my consciousness had individuated to a frequency incompatible with mass consciousness. Trying to exist at both frequencies simultaneously was creating nervous system distress. This is what Jung meant by frequency isolation. When you enter crowd consciousness, there's friction. Your higher frequency meets their lower frequency, and the clash creates psychological and physical symptoms. The incompatibility manifests as physical sensations. Anxiety when you shouldn't be anxious. Nausea for no medical reason. Heart palpitations in non-threatening situations. Your nervous system is responding to frequency mismatch as danger. You'll notice you feel this especially around unconscious groups, shopping malls, sporting events, crowded restaurants. Anywhere mass consciousness is thick, your awakened frequency can't exist comfortably in these fields. But frequency mismatch is just one layer. The fifth reason reveals why you can't perform the social requirements anymore. Awakened people can't be around crowds because crowds require you to wear a social persona, a false self that fits collective expectations. And awakened consciousness has lost the ability to maintain this false presentation. Not from unwillingness, from impossibility. Before awakening, you could put on appropriate faces for different situations. The professional self at work, the social self at parties. These weren't lies exactly. They were aspects of ego that adapted to collective requirements. But Jung discovered that awakening kills this adaptive mechanism. One of Jung's patients described this. I'd go to social gatherings and couldn't perform the expected persona anymore. People wanted polite small talk. I couldn't generate it. Not from being difficult, but from genuine inability to access the social self that used to navigate these situations. Jung said awakening had dissolved my persona-generating capacity. I could only be authentic now, and authentic self doesn't fit in crowds. This is what Jung called the death of social adaptability. You literally can't generate the false self required for group participation. Your consciousness is too integrated, too authentic to split itself into the performing fragments crowds demand. The inability creates immediate problems. People ask how you are. You can't generate fine automatically. They want enthusiasm about trivial matters. You can't fake it. Not from rudeness, but from the death of the mechanism that used to create these responses. And crowds sense this. They feel your lack of performance as threat. You're not playing the game everyone else is unconsciously playing. This makes you unsafe to collective consciousness. You'll recognize this if you've become difficult in social situations. If you can't do small talk anymore. If you're too intense, too honest, too much for group settings. Your authentic self is visible now, and authentic self threatens the collective agreement to remain masked. Why awakened people can't be around crowds? You're absorbing everyone's unconscious material, processing psychic content from multiple sources simultaneously. You're sensing the collective shadow, the darkness that emerges when unconscious people gather. Your energy is being drained, unconsciously pulled to maintain others' unconsciousness. Your frequency is incompatible, operating at a vibration groups can't match. You can't maintain persona. The false self crowds require has dissolved. Jung would want you to understand, this isn't antisocial behavior. It's not weakness, oversensitivity, or introversion. It's the natural result of consciousness that has individuated beyond collective level. You're not avoiding people. You're avoiding psychological environments that are hostile to your consciousness level. Most awakened people feel guilty about this. They think they should be able to handle crowds, but Jung insisted, consciousness that has genuinely individuated cannot exist comfortably in collective unconsciousness. It's not a choice, it's incompatibility. This doesn't mean total isolation. Small groups of conscious people are fine. One-on-one with individuals who've done their work is sustainable. But large groups of unconscious people, toxic to awaken consciousness in ways that aren't visible but are very real. If you can't be around crowds anymore, if groups drain you, overwhelm you, make you anxious or ill, Jung would tell you, stop forcing yourself into situations your consciousness has outgrown. You're not failing socially. You're protecting something precious that required enormous effort to develop. Honor your need for solitude. Respect your small circle. Trust your instinct to avoid large gatherings. You're not becoming a hermit. You're becoming wise about what your consciousness can tolerate. Find the others who understand. Small, conscious communities of individuals who've also individuated beyond collective level. They don't need large groups either. These connections, rare but deep, are what sustained Jung himself. Your awakened consciousness is precious. It required suffering to develop. It demands protection to maintain. Crowds threaten it in ways invisible to people who haven't awakened. Trust your instinct to avoid what your consciousness knows is toxic. You're not broken for needing solitude. You're not antisocial for avoiding groups. You're awakened. And awakened consciousness requires different conditions than unconscious existence. Honor that. Protect yourself. And stop apologizing for needs that arise from having done work most people will never do. Subscribe to explore Jung's insights on living as an awakened individual in an unconscious world. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.